Champagne Friday again. Bollinger, Bollinger, as we say in Sweden. What is that? James Bond? Yeah, that's one part of it. Oak-aged, traditional, multifaceted, gastronomic, beautiful champagne. One of my very few 5-star champagne producers. Perfection in its style. So let's see what this is. Well, it's a new vintage. 2014. Expectations? What could we guess here? It's sounds a little bit young for drinking a Bollinger because you need at least 10 years of age before you get the full maturity of any bottle of Bolli. But at the same time, I've written before, and I'm trying to stick to that. I'm not sure if it's always the correct thing to say, but if you take really warm, hot, big vintages, you should not go for Krug or Bollinger. They are more sophisticated when it's colder climate, when you have more refinement, because the weight is there by itself, by the vinification, by the grapes that they pick in. So 2014 is rather light, a very multifaceted, refined vintage, but could be a little bit shy from time to time, more on the flowery side than on the strong, sunny, fruity and spicy side. So let's see, what do we have? Typical vinification, as they always do, everything in oak barrels. Ailly, very much. Ailly and Björnstierne. The combination between this rich, full-bodied Ailly with the leather notes, with the hazelnutty aromas, and with the sharpness and the minerality, but on the Pinot Noir side from Björnstierne, Juhlin being most important for the Chardonnays. A little bit of Puy and Oiry also adding up to the typicity of the style. What is most important here? I think when they made it, one thing is that they wanted to showcase the floweriness, the multifaceted aromatics. So the Chardonnay is slightly higher than normal. It used to be 70-30. Now we're down to almost 60-40 on the Pinot Noir side. 61% Pinot Noir. So let's taste. Still big. It is big. And for me, if you have a super refined flowery Bollinger, I will not be satisfied. I want the muscles. I want the terroir. I want the gastronomic feeling. I want the hazelnut notes. I want the goose liver notes. And I want the sauna. And it's here. Gunpowder smokiness. Sea notes. Very much oyster shells, seawater, iodine. That's what pops up strongest. There's a flowery note, but not as flowery as the vintage in general. The fruit is not as aptly that you normally find in Bollinger when they are released. More on the Mirabelle peachy side on the fruit. The vanilla note is so perfect. It has nothing to do with the big but American oak aged wines, which gives this strong vanilla note. It's a refined Madagascar or Tahiti vanilla. Wow. Each time I taste a new vintage of Bollinger, goes bubs. You can't see them here, but underneath the shirt, they are there. Classic Bollinger in a more refined style. Less power, less weight, but still the smokiness from the start. The hazelnutty notes from the start. The sea notes, more focused than normal. More focusing on that, less on the fruity side. Minerality-wise, we are very similar to something like the 79. Which one of my first RD wines that I tasted was the 79, which was a little bit too sharp, a little bit too slow maturing when I tasted it the first time. Today it's one of the best. And you have something similar here. I think it's a beautiful wine, but it's better than many of the more famous vintages. Wow. Rosé, adding 5% of Pinot Noir from their most famous vineyard, Coton Enfant in Ailly. The sun-drained, this is a place, a spot where I love to see a Blanc de Noir, a champagne, not a red wine, but they make it as a red wine. Probably some experiments of making a champagne as well. But today, everything ends up in a few bottles of Coton Champenoise, Ailly, and here. 5% added to the same blend. And what do we get? Color-wise, more salmon. Bollinger Rosé used to be more full-bodied in color, a little bit more reddish. Here you see that it's more on the refined style, more what people normally expect. Is that a good or a bad thing? Depends on what you find on the notes, especially on the nose. Completely different. Those 5% is what? Is it the same wine? Yes, it is the same wine with those 5% added. What happens? First reaction. 80% of the gunpowder notes and the hazelnut notes are just disappearing, which is a little bit sad for me. But on the other hand, huge, beautiful, creamy, sweet red berries fruit. There is so much of the classical rosé notes of the vanilla is there very strong, caramel is very strong, praline is very strong, but mostly some cherries, strawberries and raspberries in combination. Very, very much from the still wine, which takes over a little bit too much for me. The previous vintage, I felt the other way around. I thought that the rosé was probably more flattering from the start. Here I enjoy the white notes, the purity, the elegance, the preciseness slightly more on the nose. On the palate, more impressive, more Bollinger. The smokiness, tar notes, the wood notes, the mushroomy notes, which also some people don't like the mushroomy notes of Bollinger because it could be sometimes coming from the cellar, and you're misleading to think that the notes from the cellar is something which was from the terroir from the start. The problem is that a great bottle of Bollinger should have a little bit of champignon, a little bit of truffle notes, and here you have it on the palate, not on the nose, which you have in the white version. Of course, more Ailly, more leather, more winey notes, more red wine, more seriosity, more muscles on the palate. Perfect wine for cheese. I can dream of a perfect French tray of 10 different cheeses and just drink this to all of them and mix together, and it will be a beauty. But for me, preference, no question. Today, exceptional purity within the Bollinger style. Thanks guys, thanks Denis for making such a beautiful wine, and see you next Friday.